What's up guys, this is Ultimate Device Vids, and with Apple officially dropping major iOS update support for the iPhone 6s in iOS 16, in this video we're going to be doing one final battery test for the 6s. We're going to be comparing the battery performance of the 6s on its original iOS 9 firmware that it launched with to the last iOS version that it supports, being iOS 15. And I want to do this to see if there's any substantial difference between the battery performance of this phone on its first iOS firmware in comparison to its last. And in order to make this test as fair and even as possible, I had to do a different set of things than I normally do in my battery test videos. My goal with this iOS 9 iPhone 6s was to recreate an iPhone 6s that was pulled straight from 2016. So on the iOS 9 6s here, I actually went out and installed the versions of Instagram and Subway Surfers from the same time that this version of iOS 9 was out, which is iOS 9.3.2 by the way. So the versions of these two applications here that are installed on this iOS 9 6s are the versions that were the latest versions at the time that this iOS 9 version was the latest firmware. And by the way, the older versions of these apps are installed 100% properly. They're not side-loaded or anything. I did have to go through some pretty bizarre workarounds to get them installed, but they are installed legitimately. Most older versions of App Store applications no longer function if you try to use them today, so these were a few of the only ones that I was able to find that still functioned today. And of course, we're comparing it to another iPhone 6s running iOS 15, iOS 15.5 to be exact, running the latest versions of these two applications. And of course, battery health is a very important factor to consider for any battery test. Both of these iPhones have brand new official Apple batteries installed. I took both of them to the Apple Store and got the batteries replaced just 2 days ago. You can see that reflected in the battery health settings for the iOS 15 6s, but since battery health wasn't even an option back on iOS 9, I'm not able to show it for the iOS 9 6s, but it does have a brand new Apple battery installed. And also, auto brightness and night shift are disabled on both of these devices, and the brightness is set as close to the same as I could get on both devices using a lux meter for reference, and the volume is turned all the way down on both devices. And with both devices charged up to 100%, we're going to go ahead and turn off the power source that they're connected to, and we'll remove the power cables. And we're going to kick things off with 1 hour of browsing reddit.com/subreddits in Safari. So we're just going to be loading new web pages and scrolling through these web pages. I'm using reddit.com/subreddits because it's one of the few websites that actually loaded the same on both the iOS 9 6s and the iOS 15 6s. A lot of newer websites have content that is unable to load on the older iOS 9 device. So including websites like that wouldn't really be fair because of course, one device is loading more than the other. But with the desktop version of Reddit, it loads the same version on both devices. And whenever you're watching any battery test video like this, it's important to remember that there's always a variety of varying factors that contribute to how your battery life is going to be. Things like what you do on your device, the condition of the battery in your device, the brightness of your screen, any processes that are running in the background, cell signal strength, and so many more things all play a very big role in how your battery life will be. And of course, I'm controlling as many of these variables as I can to get the most accurate results. Both of these devices are on the very same Wi-Fi network. As I said before, the brightness is set as close to the same as I could get. There's also no SIM cards in either of these devices to create a level playing field in regards to cell signal strength drainage. But even in a hyper-controlled test like this, there's always going to be minor variables that throw each device off a little bit. So rather than interpreting this video as a hyper-detailed percent point by percent point analysis, you should just interpret it as gauging overall battery performance of the 6s on these two iOS versions in comparison to one another. And after a full hour of using Safari, iOS 9 is at 94% and iOS 15 is at 92%. So negligible difference at this point, both holding up great. So next up, we're going to do a video recording test, 4K at 30 frames per second, which is the highest quality video that the iPhone 6s is able to record. So we'll go into settings here and set them both to 4K 30, and we're just going to do 10 minutes of recording because of course most people aren't going to be recording hours of 4K footage on their phone. And after 10 minutes of 4K 30 recording, checking in, iOS 9 is at 86% and iOS 15 is at 83%. So once again, negligible difference at this point, with iOS 9 being a little bit ahead. Next, we're going to head on over to Instagram and we're just going to be scrolling through posts for an hour with once again the latest version of Instagram on the iOS 15 device and the version from the iOS 9 era on the iOS 9 9 device. And a few minutes into the Instagram test, I noticed the older version of Instagram on the iOS 9 6S was unable to load videos and posts with multiple photos, as those features weren't added until a later version of Instagram. So to keep things fair, as soon as I noticed this, I started only loading posts that contained one single image on both 6Ss, again, just to try and keep things as even as possible. But anyways, after a full hour of Instagram on both devices, iOS 9 is at 73% and iOS 15 is at 68%. And once again, the same trend here is continuing, just a very minor difference between these two. Very similar performance so far. Next up, we're going to head on over to Subway Surfers and we're going to play the game for 1 hour. And once again, same thing with this application. Of course, on the iOS 15 6S, it's the latest version of the app, and on the iOS 9 6S, it's the version of this application from the iOS 9 era. And after a full hour of playing Subway Surfers, iOS 9 is at 51% and iOS 15 is at 43%. So the iOS 9 6S continues to stay in the lead, but not by much really, just a few percentage points. And alright, with the first round of the battery test complete, we're going to head back to Safari for another hour of loading new web pages and scrolling through web pages on reddit.com/subreddits. And checking in after that, iOS 9 is at 39% and iOS 15 is at 29%. So they're exactly 10% points apart at this point. Definitely pretty impressive on account of both devices. Apple did a great job of maintaining this phone over the years. I think a lot of the time people's battery health, of course, degrades over time, so they, think the phone has terrible battery life, but, it's a lot of the time just the age of the battery. And of course, as always, it depends on how you use your phone and how much you use your phone. But anyways, we're moving on here to our second 10 minutes of 4K 30 video recording. And after our second 10-minute session of video recording, iOS 9 is at 28% and iOS 15 is at 18%. So still exactly 10 percentage points apart. We'll move on to our second hour of Instagram. And after that, checking in, iOS 9 is at 16% and iOS 15 is at 5%. So at this point, it's looking like iOS 9 is probably going to take the win. So we'll move on to our second scheduled hour of playing Subway Surfers on both. And 5 hours and 39 minutes into the test, the iOS 15 6S dies. And a little while later, at 6 hours and 9 minutes into the test, the iOS 9 6S dies. And there you guys have it. I came away from this being quite impressed. I think Apple did a great job of maintaining the battery life of the 6S over its whole lifespan, as throughout this test, it was a negligible difference. iOS 9 was definitely in the lead consistently, but not by much. And it's worth noting that on the iOS 9 6S, since we used the applications from the iOS 9 era, and this pertains to both the App Store applications and even the stock applications, of course, since then, all these applications have gotten a lot more complex, a lot more features have been added, most likely in addition to a bunch of under-the-hood changes as well. So the modern versions of these apps are quite different than the versions back then. But again, my goal with this video was to compare an iPhone 6S from the iOS 9 era with all iOS 9 era software to an iPhone 6S from the current iOS 15 era with all iOS 15 software. But anyways, if you guys use an iPhone 6S or if you used to use an iPhone 6S, let me know down below in the comments section your thoughts on the device and if you're bummed out that they're dropping support for it in iOS 16. The 6S was one of Apple's strongest products in my opinion. It certainly lasted the test of time. It's Apple's longest supported iPhone in terms of major software updates ever, supporting 7 major iOS versions. Crazy. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.